Araminta from the Cwicly team. Welcome back to yet another exciting Thursday theme day, where we show you our latest design. Today, I will be sharing with you my latest Tagus design layout, available in the Cwicly Design Library. And later on, I will be building from scratch a features element. Let's take a look. This design is majorly inspired by the growing trend of dreamy color gradients, which in simple words mean blurred divs in the background, which is highly used in many web designs. I think this helps make the design look dynamic, vibrant, and creates intricacy and gives it more life than standard flat colors would. As we can see in this side-by-side comparison, the design looks completely different. One side feels lively and three-dimensional, while the other is a pale comparison. This perfectly showcases the possibilities and advantages of blurred gradient-colored divs. Another interesting aspect of this design is the use of relative styling on the hover, especially designed to enhance the idea that the divs are alive and moving, and that the user has an impact in this environment. Now, let me show you how I made this features element. In the Gutenberg editor, let's add a section, and directly add our background color by navigating to the Advanced tab into the Background panel and clicking on the Background Color selector. While I'm in the section, I will also select my typography font family by clicking on the Typography panel. It's important to do this now because it would be counterproductive to select the typography font family for every block. We can now add our div that will constitute our dreamy color gradient. This div needs a color and size. I always select the color first, before the size, because it's easier to play around with its size since it is made visible. Let's navigate to the background panel and select our background color using the gradient property. Now, let's give a size by navigating to the container sizing panel and giving it an equal height and width of 510 pixels. Right now, our div looks like a big square and is far from looking dreamy. It needs a blur effect. Let's fix this by navigating to the Effects panel and clicking on the Filters panel. I chose a blur of 80 pixels. We now have to adjust its position because I want it to be in the background and behind the columns that I will add on later. To do so, we can head to the Container Layout panel and select a position of absolute. I also decided to move it to the right for it to feel less planned and more organic. I can achieve that by placing it to the right at 355 pixels. Right now, our design looks crazy because the div is overflowing out of our section. We can rectify this by hiding the overflow in the Container Layout panel. That looks better. We can now start adding our blocks. First, we can add our H2 header. I gave mine a font of 45 pixels. As you can see, we forgot to give our section a direction. Let's swiftly give our section the column direction and make it flex start, because I want my header to be on the left. Now let's add our main block, the columns block. Since I want 6 columns and Cwicly only gives 3 by default, I need to add another 3 columns. Let's click on the Add Columns 3 times. Our header is too close to our columns block, so let's navigate to the Advanced tab and into the Margin and Padding panel and unlink the margin property and give it a bottom margin of 90 pixels. I'll start by giving our first column a white background color and give it a rounded border by heading to the Advanced tab and into the Borders panel. Let's give it a border radius of 10 pixels. Before we add our blocks, let's apply our column direction to the column block and apply Flex Start to the Align property. We can now start adding our blocks. Let's start with our icon. We can give it a size by scrolling down to the icon panel. I give my icon a size of 40 pixels. We must also select our icon in the icon library, otherwise our icon won't appear. We can now give our icon a gradient background, as a nice reminder of our gradient colored blurred div in the background. We can do this by selecting the gradient background color property. We need to add some padding and a border radius to our icon because it looks boxy and squeezed. Let's add some padding by scrolling down to the spacing panel and adding a 15 pixel padding. Underneath the spacing panel, we can find the Borders panel, where we can set its radius to 20 pixels. We can now add our H3 header with a font size of 25 pixels and capitalize it with the transform property. Let's add a 16-pixel font-sized paragraph. I will now add a div because I want my next blocks to be horizontally positioned next to each other instead of vertically on top of each other. I will also align it in the center, but justify it with the space between property. I will also give it a width by heading to the Advanced tab and into the Container Sizing panel and applying 100% width. While I will have two main elements in this div, I need to insert another div since one of these elements will contain several child blocks. Let's give it exactly the same flex properties as our first div. Let's add a 25-pixel icon and a 15-pixel paragraph and capitalize it. I will quickly give my icon the same color as my paragraph so that they appear a bit less present. Going back to the main div, we can add a 15-pixel paragraph, capitalize it, and give it a text color. The last step for our column is to make it breathe. First, let's give our blocks some margins to increase the space above and below them. Let's select our icon and head to the Advanced tab and into the Margin and Padding panel. Let's unlink the margin and give it a 30-pixel bottom margin. Let's then select our H3 header and unlink the margin and give it a 10-pixel bottom margin. Let's select our paragraph and unlink the margin and give it a 50-pixel bottom margin. Then, let's select our second div and select our paragraph and unlink the margin and give it a 5-pixel left margin. The final step is to select our column and give it a 40-pixel padding. To make this column a little more interesting, I decided to spice it up by making the background disappear on hover in order for our Dreamy gradient to peek through our design. Let's simply go into hover mode, select the background color selector, and bring the alpha channel down to 0. Going back into normal mode, we mustn't forget to add our transition effect by navigating to the Advanced tab and going into the Effects panel and the Transitions panel. Let's give it a duration of 0.4 seconds. Every block has been added to our first column block, but it's the only one that is complete. Copying and pasting every block into every other column would be crazy, when with a few clicks you can complete all the columns. The quickly linking feature allows you to have one main block that controls the style of other blocks. Let's open the Copy-Paste menu and select Copy Column Linked. Then, by selecting Replace Column on the remaining columns, the style of our first column is copied and linked. I will quickly fill in the text and icon blocks. As you can see, I can tweak my first column, whether it be a paragraph font size, the size of an icon, or the background of my column. The other columns take on the new style seamlessly. I find our columns row and columns gaps a little close to each other, so by scrolling down to the Grid Settings panel, we can set the row and column gap at 20 pixels. A little tip for fellow designers. Never forget that although your design may look amazing on desktop view, it's most important to make sure your design is responsive. To avoid a squeezed look on the tablet view, in the Columns block, I can navigate to the Grid Settings and select 2 columns, and click on the Edit Grid Layout property, and delete the third fraction. Lastly, in Mobile View, I can add 1 column, and click on the Edit Grid Layout property, and delete the second and third fraction. There you have a fully responsive feature element with a special hint of the Dreamy gradient div. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop a comment down below. And see you soon. Bye.